It's Thursday, and that means MIA podcast, and it means you get a little bit of singing from me, which is terrible, and I apologize for. Anyways, we're here to talk about the UFC fight card, RDA versus Fiziev, coming up this weekend. This one's in Vegas, right? This is another Apex card. They're starting to go away from the Apex. Okay, yeah, it is another Apex card. They're starting to go away from the Apex in the coming weeks, months, getting out on the road and seeing some other markets. So, that's nice just from a Twitter standpoint of not having to hashtag UFC Vegas and then be like, wait, which number are we on? So there's that. That's nice. This is straight up. This is a fight nerd card. It has very few fights that I think the large scale fan base is going to be super excited about, but they're all actually really interesting fights in their own way. There might be an exception here. Let me just quickly cruise down the card again. Okay, Vanderov versus Sherman. That is not interesting, so exclude that one from what I'm saying. But everything else actually is pretty interesting. It was going to be a more interesting card, I think, when David Onama was going to be fighting Austin Lingo, just because the fighter they have found to replace him, Garrett Armfield. I actually think Armfield is a better fighter than Lingo, but it's a fighter that Onama's already beaten and whose game has not fundamentally changed since that fight, even though it was way back when they were both amateurs. So there is that. So Lingo was a different challenge and stuff. So that's a fight that's lost a little bit. And there was some interest I had in Razak Al Hassan versus Jamie Pickett. That's off the card now. I thought Trayshawn Gore versus Josh Fremd was going to be a pretty interesting fight. Now we got Gore versus Cody Brundrich instead. So the fight's taken, some hits, but there's still fights that ask very poignant questions going forward that I would really like to have the answers to. So I think it's a pretty good card, but I understand the lack of hype for it. Was just looking at the PFL payouts for their last card before recording this. It's kind of surprising to see that PFL, in addition to the $1 million prize for their tournaments, their paydays are actually really competitive with the UFC. Their UFC veterans are almost all making more than at least I remember them making in the UFC. So, I hate to get that dig in fighter pay in, but I really don't hate to get it in there. The UFC's fighter pay is shit. Anyways, more fallout from the card last week, mostly centered around people are mad at Israel Adesanya. And I know in my recap, I had some not great things to say about Adesanya's performance against Jared Cannonier. That I thought it was safe, and it really kind of didn't link up with his talk about wanting to do something special and exciting in the cage. We didn't really get that. But man went out there and won the fight. I can't really argue with it. And part of it was Cannonier not really engaging a tremendous amount. And when he did, he would tend to smother. So I can't really fault him entirely for it. And it's the fights you're going to get sometimes in a title fight. This is the problem when the only way ostensibly to make decent money in the UFC is to have a belt. And you're going to take steps to keep that belt. So I blame the architecture to a certain degree. Anyways, let us move on here to the card. Oh, wait. No. We got to talk about Sean O'Malley stuff. We got to talk about this. So, to any Sean O'Malley fans who happen to listen to this, I want to say something nice about Sean. I want to lead off with the good. Again, in the Pedro Munoz fight, I think that he showed a much better way of dealing with leg kicks than he had previously. He was checking them well, but that does not score. Which I think a lot of people are like, well, you should win the first round for checking the leg kicks. No one should ever win a round for checking leg kicks. That's defense. It's like stopping takedowns. Defense is its own reward in the sense that in many cases it opens up offensive opportunities to score, and of course it denies offensive opportunities to your opponent to score. So that is stupid. But he did show better leg checking, better punishing of leg kicks. These are things that he needed to do and do well. But he still was a little bit confused by stance switching. That's something we've seen repetitively before. That if you switch stances against Sean O'Malley, it seems to uncomfort him or close the doors that he was expecting to be open coming forward. That was part of what got Cheeto Vera the win against him. It was part of what allowed Terrion Ware to be fairly competitive against him, even though that's a tremendous physical mismatch. And also reach mismatch and stylistic mismatch. Like, I like Terrion Ware, and I actually don't hate that O'Malley went the distance with him. But that was kind of my first clue that the O'Malley hype wasn't actually at any point going to be lived up to. And this fight was just kind of like another one of that. That to me is, even if you want to credit this as a win, I don't have a problem with that necessarily, because there is some suggestions that the eye injury suffered by Munoz was caused by a punch versus an eye poke, which is fair enough. I think the fight was turning somewhat in O'Malley's favor. I think that Munoz had come up with a game plan that was not his typical variety, and that was limiting what he could do. It's that sort of thing of fighting against type can sometimes lead to losing a lot of lethality in your game because it's just not natural. I think Munoz was facing that a little bit. And I do actually think O'Malley was going to win the fight. But his fans are stupid right now because they want this to be treated like a glorious, mind-boggling performance that he made Munoz quit. And here's the thing. Whether you believe the damage was caused by a punch or by an eye poke, the fact is we have the medical report at this point that says that Munoz's eye is messed up. We have pictures of it being swollen shut. Like, the idea that he felt O'Malley's power and was like, no, I need out of this, is absolutely ridiculous. And I've always said this, like, certain fighters have always accumulated fan bases that I find to be just annoying. And it's not even the fighter necessarily. Don't get me wrong, the fighter encourages this and whatever, but like, I respect the hustle of Sean O'Malley to go make that money, to make his appeal larger. I actually find it more annoying that people fall for it. It's kind of like in Formula One, there's a driver named Max Verstappen right now who has this absolute max army of fans that will respond to any critique of him with loud cries of, you just hate him. And it's like, no, I really don't. Back when he hadn't yet won a championship, and even now he's only won one championship, I didn't want to claim him as the greatest driver ever or like a revolutionary talent, because I still don't think he is. It's not hating. But anyways, enough of the Sean O'Malley stuff. He's going to keep doing what he's going to do. His fans are going to keep doing what they're going to do. And it's annoying. There we go. Let's talk about this fight card. So at the top of the card, we got definitely the most interesting fight on the card. The most impactful one. Rafael Dos Anjos, Rafael Fiziev. Fiziev is right now coming up with a tremendous run and is actually a favorite in this fight, which is a little surprising. Minus 210 to plus 175 for Dos Anjos. A lot of people are really, really, really low on RDA right now. And I get some of the reasons. You know, losing to Michael Chiesa, it's not a great look. Beating Felder is not a particularly great look. And Renato Moicano right now is not a super meaningful win either. But the thing is that when your worst loss is still only Michael Chiesa, because otherwise it's Leon Edwards fighting for a title, Kamaru Usman has a belt, Colby Covington has fought twice for a title, and these are all, like, by the way, a division up. Tony Ferguson back in 2016 when that was really good, and losing the title to Eddie Alvarez, I don't fully understand it. Like, the man is still beating Tarek Safadine, Neil Magny, Robbie Lawler, Kevin Lee, and yes, Paul Felder straight off the couch. I don't think he's actually all that gone or done. I still think his game is pretty intact. That he translates from a striking to a grappling to or to a wrestling to a grappling better than most in history, to be honest. He's got a good leg kick game. He's got a good striking game. He's got good takedowns. And I have to ask the question, what has Fiziev done that makes you think in this stylistic matchup he's kind of got this? Because like his UFC run of 5 straight wins is almost all strikers or guys who are janky wrestlers at best. Alex White, pretty much a pure striker. Mark Diakese does wrestle, but like fits into that very, very janky style thing. Moicano is predominantly a striker. Bobby Green, predominantly a striker. Brad Riddle, pretty much entirely a striker. And these are the wins he's gotten. I'm not saying that like Fiziev can't win this fight. For example, I'm just saying we haven't really seen him in this type of fight because, I mean, you could argue that Magomed Mustayev is sort of a wrestler, kind of, but he knocked him out in a minute and a half, and in spectacular fashion, in a way that like RDA is not going to replicate. Mustayev is a physical freak of explosiveness and coordination that few fighters are going to replicate that kind of threat level. But like, it's a serious point that like Fiziev has had guys who largely are going to play into his game. RDA is not going to play into his game. He is, I think we can all agree, going to try to wrestle him. What does Fiziev do against that? We haven't honestly seen the answer. The UFC has done similar to what they've done with Sean O'Malley, although less ridiculously. Similar to what they've done with Paddy Pimblett, though less ridiculously. Similarly to what they've done with Ian Gary, but less ridiculously. More akin to like the Conor McGregor build, where like the names are perfectly fine, but it's a bunch of people that are going to ask not the same question by any means, but they're not going to ask the question that realistically for Fiziev to be a top 10 fighter for a long period of time has to be asked. What happens if he's pressured? What happens if someone brings a grappling game to him? And that is why this fight is so fascinating. But like it's just being written off by so many people. I don't fully understand why. Like, I mean, part of my brain is inclined to go with RDA. We've seen RDA win this type of fight before. Flashy striker, powerful striker, effective striker with an unproven anti-wrestler game. RDA has got that job done before. And we have never seen Fiziev win this fight. That doesn't mean he can't. He's extremely powerful. He's going to have a puncher's/kicker's chance at all times. But I can't help but think that it's really a mystery as to how he actually defeats someone who brings RDA's game. So do I gamble on the idea that Fiziev is going to handle something that he hasn't fully seen before? Or am I going to gamble on Father Time having not yet defeated Rafael Dos Anjos? Like, that to me, oversimplified obviously, is what it boils down to. And I still don't know. I sit here before you, honestly not having an answer. I'm still thinking about it. I'm going to go with RDA. And I think that's going to be, like, the betting odds tell me that that's an unpopular pick. And the Twitter reactions tell me that that's an unpopular pick, that it's kind of like a hot take. But I have to say it. I trust, even at 37 years old, that RDA still exists in a not in a championship challenging role, not in a top 5 fighter role, maybe not even in a top 10 role, honestly. I mean, this is lightweight. This is a ridiculous up-and-coming division with the likes of Gamrot and Saryukian and I don't know if you can call him an up-and-comer anymore, but Makachev, Jalen Turner. These are all like people coming up that like look really, really, really scary. And like Fiziev is definitely in that mold. But until I see Fiziev deal with a grappling heavy pressure approach game plan by someone who's good at it, I want to make that clear. We have seen him deal with people who have lost the striking battle with him, try to translate into a grappling battle with him. But that's not the same thing as somebody who comes out with that as the A plan. That is their game plan, not their desperation. This isn't working. I have to try something else. Solution. RDA is going to pressure him. He is going to try to grapple him. And I haven't seen what he responds to that with. So I'm going with RDA. I know that's probably that. Like I said, that's the unpopular pick. Going out on a limb here, and yeah, 37 years old at lightweight is it's old. It's old. I'm very worried about it. Tapology has got him 69% for Fiziev. I wish I had that confidence in Fiziev. Don't get like seriously. I want to be picking Fiziev in this fight because I want new blood. Like I just said, RDA is not a championship contender anymore. RDA is not a top 5 fighter anymore. RDA might not even be a top 10 fighter anymore. So like the bright side would be that like Fiziev is all of those things. But I don't know. I'm not ready to pull that trigger. I'm just not. Kyle Borello or Bohayo, pardon me, versus Armen Petrosian. I always got to remember that's how it's pronounced. Bohayo came through with flying colors, but honestly, like, am I the only one that feels like his win over Omar Gatsiev had more to do with like sort of a fear that we had with Omar Gatsiev that he actually had a really padded record? I'm going with Petrosian here. Petrosian fought Gregory Rodriguez. Now, admittedly, Gregory Rodriguez is a guy who does not fight nearly the controlled, structured style that Bohayo does actually have. Bohayo's kind of like that. The poor man's Machida is what we're always going to say about it. He's got a surprisingly good control grappling game. It's sneaky. He has good back takes. He has good submissions. He has good singular power strikes on the feet. Very karate-esque in that regard. Good at keeping the range. Good at actually working from the clinch. But it does feel like that the pocket is an area that Petrosian can exploit. And it doesn't really feel like Bohayo actually has a better force a grappling game onto someone than Gregory Rodriguez does, than RoboCop does. And, Petrosian is actually a really good kickboxer. Not Alex Bahia level, not because we just saw him knock out Sean Strickland. Not a guy who I think is actually going to be... He might get to the top 10 just because this is middleweight. And middleweight is like this kind of weird land of you can just kind of be a specialist and actually do really, really well. But when it comes down to it, like, is Bohayo's power going to be a problem for him after dealing with Rodriguez? No. Is Bohayo maybe going to be a little bit more tactically sound than Rodriguez? Yes. Is he going to have a bit better timing? Probably, actually. Bohayo has good counter timing. But I trust Petrosian's chin to be fine. I trust Petrosian to be good enough as a counter wrestler and counter clinch player to not let that dominate the fight and to ride out a decision here against Bohayo, who is pretty tough. I don't think he's only got one loss, so the answer is probably no. Yeah, lost to João Carvalho way back in 2015 via decision. So never been finished. Petrosian is not a super amazing finisher. Like, he's got a lot of finishes. He finished Kolev. He finished some dude who's 0-0 somehow 2 fights before fighting in the UFC. That matchmaking is weird. Finished Minikov. He's actually finished every opponent he's had except for Rodriguez. The only problem is that outside of Kolev, who he fought right before he got into the UFC, they're just not very good. And even Kolev isn't actually all that good. I look at his record now, and I'm like 10-0 against a bunch of cans. Part of me goes like, am I falling into the same trap I had with Bohio's last fight, where I think I picked Omar Gatsiev to beat him, and it was like I was trusting somebody who on paper looked really good, but hadn't really shown it against someone like that we could really, really comment full stop. He was a good fighter, but like we did see Petrosyan against Rodriguez, and Rodriguez is, for all of his complete lacking fight IQ, a really good fighter. Like, has excellent physicality, has technical grab bag skill kind of everywhere, and is actually really, really good. So yeah, I'm going with Petrosyan, even though I actually thought Rodriguez won the fight. But I'm not sold on Bahio. I'm not sold on Petrosyan, but Petrosyan does have the better performance of the two, I think. So I'm gonna go with Petrosyan by decision. Probably the least interesting fight to break down on this card is Said Nurmagomedov versus Douglas Silva de Andrade. The reason is kind of simple. Douglas Andrade is just kind of like a tank. He's a bully fighter. He cuts a lot of weight, so he's huge for the weight class. He's super athletic, super tough, super durable as well. But like technically speaking, there's not a lot there. Like it's a lot of just like pure power game, which makes sense because this is a guy who for the longest time was training in his backyard with like cinder blocks as his weight machines, basically. So it is what it is. He's still at a nowhere gym, as far as I know. It's NFT Castanhal. I don't even know where that. I assume it's in Brazil, but I have no idea even. Oh yeah, it is, because he's home fighting out of Castanhal Parra, Brazil. There you go. Yeah, I don't. I don't have a lot of faith in him to win a fight against somebody who has similar athletic ability, in a nutshell. Like, with his fights, it's kind of like he recently fought Sergey Morozov, and I confidently picked him on that because Morozov is a fighter who fights kind of the same. He fights with like the idea that he's a really good athlete and isn't necessarily. I broke that down. That's why I picked Raulian Paiva to beat him. I was wrong. But I was right when I said Andrade would beat him. The problem here is that like Nurmagomedov actually is a really good athlete. Not a Khabib level athlete, because obviously the comparison with the last name is always going to be there. Although, am I right in saying that Said is not actually related to Khabib? I remember for some reason that. Is there any mention of Khabib in his actual? No, there isn't. I don't know, but I feel like the answer is actually he's like a distant cousin, or like actually not even related. Because it is a fairly common last name in the area. Still trains out of that same kind of Dagestani roots, obviously. So I'm not saying like, oh, he's not related to Khabib, therefore he's no good, or because he would, but just I don't know. It's an interesting fact. He has a much better range keeping game. Like, unlike Morozov, who's really just going to want to fight in the pocket with you, Said does have an outside game. He has a good kicking game. He'll work the legs. He'll work the body. He'll go upstairs. Excellent dexterity, excellent flexibility. Has an incredibly dangerous and insidious lethal ground game, which he can catch Andrade in, because, again, there's a lot of just bucking bronco to Douglas. By the way, just quick odds. I'm picking the underdog in both the co-main and the main. Wow, because Petrosyan's plus 160 to Bahio's minus 140. I think this one I'm picking the favorite in. Yeah, minus 250 to plus 200 for Said. Makes sense. Said just feels like a more dangerous fighter than what I'd be comfortable picking him on. He did just submit Cody Stamann. He did dominate Mark Striegel. Not that that's super impressive, but that lost, and he beat, Ricardo Ramos, who's a really good physical fighter, and Justin Scoggins, who's a really good physical fighter. It hasn't been raw physicality that's beaten him. It's been Ronnie Barcelos, who I keep saying is like the most underrated fighter in the lower weight classes, without a doubt. And that loss to Victor Henry did hurt a lot on that regard. I felt very certain he would win that fight, and he didn't. But losing to Barcelos is no shame. Saeed by... Do I think he stops Douglas? I guess that's the question. Because, I mean, Peter Yan stopped him. Rob Font stopped him. Do I think Saeed... I could see him pulling off a similar submission to what Rob Font got him with. So, yeah, I'm gonna say Saeed by submission. Jared Vanderhoff versus Chase Sherman. The winner of this fight is whoever of these guys is less absolutely broken. Sherman is a guy who, if we went back in time and made this fight on the regional scene, I would have picked him in a heartbeat. He seems to have a lot higher physical upside than Vanderhoff. He has a pretty good striking. He has some ingredients of a good boxing game, but he's defensively completely porous. He seems just kind of broken right now on a mental level, even on a physical level to a certain degree. Vanderhoff's lost a bunch of fights in a row, but like he was beating Alexei Olenek until he got freaking neck crank from Scarfold. He arguably beat Andrei Arlovsky. Split decision, could have gone either way. And the loss to Alexander Romanov, which both of them have, is fine. Romanov is a really good fighter. But, like, you know, he beat Justin Tafa. Lost to Sergey Spivak. My lord, he's 1-4 and he's still on a UFC contract. That's actually legitimately surprising. This again kind of goes back to my whole, like, why I dislike heavyweights. Like, these two are both 1-4 on their current UFC runs, and here we are. And I mean, and Sherman was brought back after a 2-5 run. So I don't know. I'm going with Vanderhoff. He does have a wrestling game that he can implement if he needs to. He's still pretty durable on the feet, even if his striking is kind of a mess. I trust him to do more. I trust him to fight hard for like 15 minutes. And I don't trust Chase Sherman to fight hard for that long. It's kind of sadly what this fight breaks down to. Looks like people are generally with me on this. Vanderhoff minus 180. Sherman coming back at plus 155. Cynthia Calvillo, Nina Nunez. This is another kind of sad fight because Cynthia Calvillo's development has gone all kinds of wrong. I think she's tried to develop the wrong style, frankly. She's had the Paige Van Zandt sort of path to technical development. Sorry, took a drink there. And what I mean by this is that Calvillo came from a wrestling background, and when she hit the scene, a lot of her success came from a little bit of wrestling grinding and an underrated submission game to a certain degree. She would find dominant positions and do things with them. And then she started trying to develop a boxing game. And this is not bad. You have to develop a boxing game. Because, I mean, otherwise you end up kind of like at a Carla Esparza level, which sounds great when you consider she's the current strawweight champion. But like someone who's facing the same problem over and over again, which is like, how do you convincingly win fights without like a tremendous amount of physical athletic ability as a wrestler? And she's tried to develop a boxing game, and that's fine. But her boxing game is completely divorced from her wrestling game. And this means that there's no flow, there's no transition between the two. And all of I've said before, the thing is that Nina Nunez, generally just like getting a little bit older, 36 years old, and has fought kind of sporadically since becoming a mother. Her and Amanda Nunez had the baby. So she basically became Nina Nunez, basically. I remember the first time when I saw that, actually, because she's forever indelibly lodged in my head as Nina Ansaroff, kind of similar to how Cheyenne Velismus is Cheyenne Bays. It's just that first name that you come across kind of becomes it, regardless of marriage later or breakup of a marriage in Cheyenne's case. It's just, I don't know, it's a little bit difficult. So when Nina Nunez popped up for a fight with, I want to say it was the Tatiana Suarez fight? Was it? Or was it the Mackenzie Dern fight? I was actually really confused as to who it was. And she's riding that 2-fight losing streak again to completely understandable opponents. But she seems to have stalled. She had a great run. Great run that was was highlighted by that win over Claudia Gadelha she had, which I don't think anyone saw coming. And it was a great run, and then she focused on things that are not fighting, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to acknowledge that I don't know how full-time she is in that capacity. And, she's also up a weight class. This is a flyweight bout, her flyweight debut. She is somebody who, to a certain degree, has relied on strength. Now, granted, I don't think there's going to be a huge size difference because, of course, Calvillo actually had her formidable time, was also a strawweight. She's up at flyweight now, but was a strawweight. But she's been here a while. She's more acclimated to the size. I'm gonna go with Calvillo, but I don't feel good about it. I feel like at their peaks, I would have picked Calvillo to win this fight. So with them both being not at their peak, I kind of have to go with Calvillo, even if I think that she has made terrible, terrible decisions when it comes to how to develop her fight game, or her coaches have. And either way, she's made mistakes in that regard because either she's listened to coaches who have bad ideas for her, which is a mistake, or she's actively directed her game this way. So the question is she Paige Van Zandt, who actively directed herself to a game that divorced herself from what she was good at? Or is this just like a coaching miscue? I don't know which. But anyways, taking Calvillo, just a little bit more comfort with her at feather or at flyweight. A little more comfort about where she is physically and where she is in terms of attention to her career. And she is the favorite here, minus 150 to plus 125. So seems like I'm in with the mix here. Michael Johnson, Jamie Malarkey. If I trusted Michael Johnson to handle adversity, to be a fighter, I guess in a nutshell, I would pick him to win this fight because he has all the physical tools, and Malarkey's A game is not what his historically broken Johnson. What his historically broken Johnson has been people who are going to grapple with him persistently and force that game upon him and kind of just break him with that because he hates grappling or he loves getting choked. The MMA Vivisection guys had a joke when he fought Alain Patrick that actually he just really his grappling defense his training is actually just to loop a belt around his neck and around the doorknob and strangle himself. He actually just really, really loves that. But I think the answer is he just hates grappling in a way that Robbie Lawler hates grappling, but more fatalistic. And Malarkey can grapple. He's got a couple of sub wins. He will grapple when the striking's not going his way. And that is why I'm picking him. I would be way more confident in picking Malarkey if he ever displayed kind of a grappler first mentality. He doesn't. He's going to try to strike with Johnson, but he hits hard. He's surprisingly durable for a guy who seems kind of awkward when he eats punches. And he has a surprisingly good cardio and mental toughness for a guy who, in the face, kind of often looks really tired and beaten, and still goes out there and fights really, really hard. And there's no change. I just don't trust Michael Johnson to win a fight. I'm having a hard time thinking about who I would pick Michael Johnson to beat. He's a plus 200 underdog. Minus 240 on Malarkey. That's too wide. Don't bet on that. Or if you do, go bet on Michael Johnson. That's kind of honestly my take on that. But again, it's an interesting fight because it's not it's not an easy fight for Malarkey by any means. But he has shown an ability to out hustle, outwork, out-grind, out-technique guys who are better athletes in the past. And that seems like a ripe thing for a decision loss or maybe even a submission loss for Michael Johnson. Ayman Zahabi versus Ricky Turcios. Two guys that I have no faith in. I'm having to put that up a lot. No faith in like their style. Okay, so like with Zahabi, I think that there is a technically clean aspect to his style that honestly becomes sterile, like a surgical theater almost. That nothing really changes, nothing really flows. He doesn't react to what's in front of him. He's fighting like he's reading a textbook in his mind as he's doing this, where it's like, all right, I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and the variables of what the opponent are doing are not remotely entering his mind. And in Turcios' case, it's like honestly the complete opposite. There is a complete lack of structure to his game. He loves to fight. Like, I'm going to say nice things here. Turcios loves to fight. He has all of those like mentality things you look for: toughness, willingness to push through the pain, willingness to push through being tired, willingness to try different freaking things like an ADD fighter. And since he's been a Team Alpha Male, he's been doing a lot more wrestling. I just think that like he has some physical answers for Zahabi in a nutshell. And Zahabi, against people who force a pace, force chaos, force physicality on him, hasn't historically done very well. So as much as I like honestly think that Turcios is going to lose a lot in the UFC, he's going to get chances because he's an Ultimate Fighter win and they're trying to push that show again. I think he's going to be bad, but I think at the same time this is a fight that like he can win because, well, case in point, like Zahabi's run in the UFC is, I believe, 1-2. He beat Draco Rodriguez last time out, but lost to Vince Morales, who himself is a bit of a flawed fighter. Got spinning back out by Ricardo Ramos, who's a bit of a flawed fighter. Oh, he's 2-2. I forgot he beat Reginaldo Vieira in his UFC debut. But like, biggest win is in fact Draco Rodriguez. Not that Turcios looks particularly better, but he's just chaos. I don't foresee him doing well. He did beat Steve Garcia. Okay, it's probably better than the win over Rodriguez, especially given that like Steve Garcia is up at middleweight. Yeah, we're gonna go with Rodriguez or not Rodriguez. Turcios. The odds have him favored. I agree. But I don't know. There's a ton of I'm never going to be comfortable picking Turcios. Never, ever going to be comfortable with that read because there's so many openings to his game. There are so many defensive liabilities. It's just, I think that Zahabi needs a textbook fighter to make his style work. And he's the sort of fighter who's going to lose a fight against somebody who just does something that shouldn't work. And therefore, he's not prepared for it. So, Turcios, decision, because Zahabi is pretty hard to finish. And Turcios is not necessarily a big finisher in any regard. Antonina Shevchenko versus Courtney Casey. Both of these girls are messes in very similar ways. I don't trust either of them to press a striking advantage, even if they might actually have one. They kind of both will probably fight their way into the clinch. They will probably both go for like terrible grappling ideas that will end with them in a bad spot. And that really leaves me with like a big question of who's going to win, because I don't think of either as being particularly better than the other as a grappler. I feel like their wins and losses are kind of like very similar. Like Shevchenko's lost to Casey O'Neill, KGB Lee, Caitlin Chikagian, Roxanne Modaffari, has beaten Lucy Pudilova, Jeon Kim, and Ariane Lipsky, who are all pretty flawed fighters in their own right. Courtney Casey has been around forever and has lost to basically anyone you care to think of that is worth particularly a damn, and has beaten the likes of Christina Stanchu and Ronda Marcos, Jessica Aguilar. Surprisingly beat Angela Hill. That is surprising. I forgot that. Liana Jojua, Maria Borello. Flip a coin. It looks like people like Shevchenko minus 175 to plus 145. But, like, I still think that that's a lot of name recognition. Like, Antonina Shevchenko's betting lines are almost always more favoring to her than I think they actually should be. I think they think that that there's some tangible link between her and Valentina, and there actually is, in the sense that, like, if you look at the thought progression of Valentina and Antonina, it's actually very, very similar. It's just that Antonina backs up none of the stupid things that work for Valentina with any physicality. It's kind of like Jason Guida, Clay Guida, I guess. Like, there's a connection there. They both kind of want to fight the same fight, but, like, Clay has frankly, just the cardio and raw durability to actually do that, and Jason never did. And it's the same with the Shevchenko sisters in a lot of ways. I'm going to go with Courtney Casey. She's beaten slightly better grapplers over her career than Antonina. If Casey gets a good position, I do trust her to, like, do something with it, and I don't really trust Antonina to do the same. But, like, I make this pick with zero confidence, honestly. Both of these ladies are getting to the point where, like, there's probably just going to be a physical, like, complete fall apart at some point, and that's it. Cody Brundridge versus Tresean Gore. Tresean Gore is they're near even. It was like minus 115, minus 101, or 105. So, like, there's no real difference on the betting lines here, but I am surprised because Gore is 3-1. Like, the thing with Gore is he shouldn't be in the UFC. And that's not me saying that, like, he should never be in the UFC. There's obvious physical potential in him. He's super strong, super powerful, super athletic in general. Explosive, powerful, hits hard, fast. Like, he has all of those building criteria, but he partners that with also being just all the unproven aspects that you kind of see with a fighter like him, and not with a particularly good gym. I don't know what gym he's with. Tapology apparently doesn't know what gym he's with. I don't know. And it's a super low output, like, power striking style that works on the regional scene because you're going to get someone who just runs straight into something. And Brundridge might, but at the same time, you're dealing with somebody in Brundridge who has a good, persistent wrestling game, did just beat a guy who hits probably cleaner, if not harder, in Lujanbula, and can probably get this done. Like, he could probably get the takedowns. He probably can do a lot to Gore what happened in Gore's last fight, but better. Like, Gore's coming off a loss to Brian Battle. What about Brian Battle is, like, leagues above what Cody Brundridge is? I don't know. Like, I feel like Battle's actually even a worse athlete, and is actually is dropping to welterweight to fight Takeshi Sato in his next fight. So, like, there's that too. Brundridge is, I think, a fair bit bigger, fair bit more muscular. So I'm taking Brundridge. I'm not a massive fan of Brundridge by any means. He's kind of one note, kind of just like a grinder. But he is tough. He knows what he is. He's going to try to put that style on. Whereas I think honestly, Gore needs to lose a couple of times and learn. And the thing is that it would be better for him to have, like, just close calls on the regional circuit that inspire him to grow. And instead he's going to have them in the UFC and then maybe be just discarded for that. Which is a shame because there's a lot of promise there. David Onama versus Garrett Armfield. This would be a more interesting fight if like they hadn't fought already. And the other thing is like Armfield's just much smaller. He's 5'7". He shouldn't honestly be at featherweight. He should be at bantamweight. It's kind of all there is to it, really. It's kind of go the same. Like Armfield. The thing about Armfield is that he's supposed to be at Sanford, aka Killcliff now, FC, the gym. But I don't see any of the technical hallmarks of their game in him. He's got good power striking. Like he's got some physical, like natural power, natural application of it through clean technique. I like it. But from a grappling standpoint, he basically is incredibly willing to let his back get taken. And I don't really know what to do with him. Like a guy who probably still needs some time on the regional scene to develop before being thrown into, ideally, the deep end of bantamweight as opposed to featherweight. And that's just kind of the thing is like, I found footage of their fight the first time. I think Onama has gotten better. I think Armfield is still kind of the same fighter. Like a little bit, a better version of that fighter. But I think Onama is actually diversified. I'm really high on David Onama. Really, really high. I think he strings his combinations really well together. I think he keeps range very well. Isn't uncomfortable in the pocket. Is willing to transition into a wrestling game when needed. Has a reasonably good ground game. Actually, he's kind of the perfect James Krause fighter. And yeah, I'm picking him to take the W here. Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Carl Roberson. Nzechukwu is the favorite here, although very slightly. It's minus 115, minus 105. So kind of like the same thing as the Brundridge Gore fight. He is a lot taller. Like he is 4 inches taller and has a 9-inch reach advantage. And that really makes me think that he should win. And Roberson has lost 3 in a row. To Khalil Roundtree, to Brendan Allen, and to Marvin Vettori. He was knocked out by Allen. He was knocked out by Roundtree. These are both bad signs, but those are all more lethal fighters and better fighters and more comfortable fighters than Kennedy Nzechukwu is. And that's kind of the thing that I honestly can't get around when breaking down an Nzechukwu fight is like, you're athletic, you're 6'5", you have some decent technique, you should be a good fighter. There are great building blocks here. But you also seem uncomfortable as all hell being in a fight. And Roberson, even when he's losing, does appear to be comfortable. Does appear like he's in the fight. I think the betting line here is pretty accurate. But like Nzechukwu on paper should win this fight, but there's a ton of like mental hangups that he seems to have, and that's going to lead to mental hangups on a betting point of view or a breakdown point of view. I'm going to go with Roberson because I don't trust it. I don't trust it. Now, you could argue, you could make a solid argument that Khalil Roundtree is kind of like really similar to Nzechukwu in the sense that he also has a lot of mental hangups that lead to things, but like Roundtree is comfortable until you make him uncomfortable. Kennedy starts uncomfortable. Like Kennedy at his best point as a fighter is already rattled. It's just really hard to pick. Really hard to make that pick. I don't think his reach is going to be enough to insulate him from Roberson. And that's the thing is like I've said this. I don't remember what fighter I was talking about. I think it was Jalen Turner. It was Jalen Turner talking about like having reach being an insulation versus being an active defense. Nzechukwu is definitely at the insulation phase. His reach buys him time because you have to figure it out because it's huge. But It's not going to change. It's not going to, and he's not going to use the time you're figuring it out to create counter opportunities and traps. He's just going to kind of let you come to him. And yeah, I got Roberson. Couldn't beat Nick Nagamarianu. Lost to Daun Jung, although he did knock out Carlos Ulberg, who is actually looking a little bit better. You know what? That Ulberg fight kind of changes my mind. Roberson got knocked out by Khalil Roundtree. I'm gonna say the same thing happens here. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna take a gamble here because like the thing is, if Roberson wins, I don't feel good about it either way. Like if I pick him, I don't feel good. If I don't pick him, I still don't feel good. So like this is gonna be kind of like an emotional pick where like with Kennedy, it's like if he could just sort some things out, sports psychology standpoint, and like diversify his skills and make use of things, actually would be a really feel good fighter. Seems like a good guy. Trains at Fortis MMA. I'm gonna have faith in them to do something with him, and I'm picking him to win. Also, Roberson really shouldn't be a light heavyweight, but anyways. And then I'm really excited about the first fight of the night: Ronnie Lawrence versus I'm gonna butcher the name. Saikub Rakhmonov or Kakramanov. Pardon me. For some reason, I was thinking of the Kazakhstani guy. By the way, like just a note: is there any particular reason that that Rafael Fiziev is sporting an Azerbaijani flag at a lot of the on a lot of the MMA sites now? Because he's a native of Kyrgyzstan and he's tied to Thailand and the United States from a training standpoint. Just feels kind of a weird flag change. I don't know. Anyways, this fight. I'm looking forward to this fight because both of them are kind of like super interesting fighters in the sense that they both have like all the prerequisite physical skills. There's the right physicality there. There's the right athleticism. They both have like kind of a weird kick where like they're both at the heart of the matter, like at their best when they're implementing a pressure wrestling style on people. Even though I don't think either of them are actually wrestlers. Like Ronnie Lawrence has been specifically noted by Daniel Cormier and like the commentary booth as not a wrestler, even though Cormier says he can wrestle. And they kind of like make a big deal about that every time he fights. Like that he has no wrestling background, but has a natural feel for it. And in Kakramanov's case, I'm not sure if he has no background in wrestling. Because he's Uzbek. They almost always do. But it also feels like he would really like to be like kind of a fancy, flashy kickboxer at times. They're both like bizarrely willing to throw kicks that lead to like getting stuck in the clinch, which would be a really bad idea if they weren't actually really good from that position and able to generally out wrestle their opponent. Like it's they're not they're not well put together fighters, but they're like super interesting fighters that lead to just like fun fights of like bizarreness. It's not like I was talking about Shevchenko and Casey earlier, where like they're two fighters that are completely built wrong to take advantage of their athletic abilities and like what they have working for them, and they end up like as less fighters because of that. But Lawrence and Kakramanov just end up being kind of like intriguing. I think it's also the fact that like you're fighting in a division that's actually really, really deep. So, having fun fighters who just are like janky is, kind of fun. Kakramanov did miss weight last time he fought, but I think that had more to do with the short notice than anything else. It was a short notice fight. He didn't miss by a huge amount. He missed by like 2.5 pounds. I assume because he's made 135 before that he'll have that all sorted out. He'll come in. He'll look good on the scales. He'll make the weight. He'll go in there. And I'm giving him the slight edge over Lawrence. And it's entirely based on the idea that I think Kakramanov is a slightly better athlete. Like I hate to break it down to like just you're a better athlete, but like they both want to implement very similar games. They both have very similar like techniques for getting there. They both have similar tendencies to have fight IQ breakdowns that lead to trouble. And in that case, I'm kind of left picking the guy who is maybe like a slightly better athlete. Like if Lawrence is like an 84 out of 100 athletically, Kakramanov maybe like an 87. But we'll see. I mean, I may regret this like on the first tie up if Lawrence just comes out and is like, so no. I am actually stronger than you in the clinch. Like it could go against me really quickly. But I'm interested to see how it plays out. And I do think Kakramanov has that slight physical edge. So there's the predictions. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoy the card because I honestly think that this card is very, very, very enjoyable. I do honestly think that that is the case because we're dealing with a we're dealing with a fight nerd card. Like everything, a lot of that's really, really interesting stuff. Talked about them like Kakramanov versus Lawrence. Is it terribly important? No, but it's interesting. Is Onama versus Armfield terribly important? No, but it's interesting. Is Brunfield versus Gore or Brundage versus Gore terribly relevant? No, but it will tell us a fair bit about Tresean Gore. And, there's a bunch of that up and down the card. Michael Johnson versus Jamie Larkey probably will be a fun fight. I think that Andrade versus Nurmagomedov, fun fight. Bohio versus Petrosian, fun fight. And RDA versus Fiziev, of course, is an incredibly lightning fight because you have, like I said, Fiziev facing a classic challenge that a kickboxer needs to face at some point and pass. And that makes it a really, really interesting fight. Also, I'm picking a bunch of underdogs, so that's fun. Anyways, wrap it up with the usual. Check out the Discord down below wherever you're watching or listening because we do MMA simulation action there where basically you get to have a career as an MMA fighter in cyberspace and, have that fun and like try out some things and see how easy it is, I guess. We also have Pro Wrestling Sim and the Slam Ball Sims coming back for Season Dose. We also have a Fight League prediction contest going on. There are no prizes, just bragging rights. And you can talk about with people about MMA or basically, honestly, kind of like a little bit of anything else. And check out the Twitch and YouTube activities that I have in the gaming realm. So there you go. Check out the Discord, check out the Twitter, and check out the Facebook. I'm out. You have a good day.